So I started as a bridal makeup artist. So I was the first person who basically took a makeup box and had the guts to charge people that I will do your makeup and you'll be able to pay me for it. But I grew from that bridal makeup artist to being an operator of the business that had makeup artists.
People don't know how to separate business money from their own money.
My business, when I was running it, I earned a salary like everybody else. I didn't buy shoes and wigs from business money.
You've built House of Tara. Even though Africa has more female entrepreneurs, we have fewer female millionaires. Why do you think that's the case?
A lot of the women entrepreneurs are small-scale entrepreneurs. The audacity to be big thinkers, to be big dreamers. It seems like we're limited in that vein.
But the system definitely gives each of us equal opportunities to be able to do that.
I doubt that the system does. Even the women who desire for more are not getting the access to capital in the way that men do.
How do women, the young girl that is listening to you now, how do they break free from that?
I want them to actually know that we've seen the world being managed and controlled by powerful men. We want to rule the world in a way that there is more equity and the world is a better place for our children.
Is the desire to have equality or equity among men and women?
We're designed differently. The way we see the world is different. But I think it's that variety that should make the world a better place. But that's my personal opinion.
So I'm going to read some data that I've got from my research. And I think that's really going to sum up a lot of the things we are going to be discussing because of the powerhouse that you are. It says that, women make up 58% of self-employed population in Africa. And female entrepreneurial activity rate is about 24%. Actually, is the highest globally. Now, the research actually talks about the fact that in Africa, many parts of African countries, female entrepreneurship is high. But the problem is that even though Africa has more female entrepreneurs, we have fewer female millionaires. Why do you think that's the case?
Thank you. It's a very good question. It's a conversation that I often discuss as someone who's talking more about how we build to last on the continent. And one of my observations is that we don't really build at scale for women. A lot of the women entrepreneurs are small-scale entrepreneurs. In some cases, we can grow up to a medium scale, but the audacity to be big thinkers, to be big dreamers, it seems like we're limited in that vein. And that's why we're not seeing a lot of women who transition their businesses. They start small, and sometimes they just stay in that size as long as it's able to meet up certain things, school fees, lifestyle, and the likes. But the desire to become is changing. And I think maybe the ladies who are currently in their 30s and their early 40s, we're going to see more of them grow at scale. But in the past, if you look at the Dangote generation or you look at the Otedola generation, there are very, very few women who have built and have scaled in the sense of the likes of Dangote, right? And oftentimes, yes, women are doing business, but many times it's because they are looking for ways to ensure that they can stay home and be, present for the children. And business now becomes a way of being engaged, get some economic independence from that, but not with a desire to build at scale. So I think it's the challenge is that a lot of women are not building at scale, and that's why we're not seeing a lot of women billionaires.
But the system definitely gives each of us equal opportunities to be able to do that?
I doubt that the system does. And for one reason, first of all, I'm sure that even the women who desire for more are not getting the financial support, and financial support meaning access to capital, right, in the way that men do. And sometimes I think the bankers will say, well, maybe what you're presenting is not as inspiring for us as we would like. In other cases, because the women are not being given that. And I always tell the story about how I wanted to get funding. The very first time I was looking to get funding, and I'd gone to sit with the MD of a bank. And across the table for me, he asked me if I had collateral. And I said my product was the collateral. And then he just said, well, why don't you ask your husband for collateral? And I looked at him and I said, sir, with all due respect, if my husband had come to you for a loan, would you have asked him to ask me for a collateral? And you could see he was clearly embarrassed by that. But this is how we think on the continent. And then soon after that, he said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I said that, and basically tried to retrace his steps. But if you think about it, that was his default, is to ask me for my husband to give me a collateral. Whereas if it was my husband, he wouldn't have asked.
I think you also find that a lot of the female self-employed are in the informal sector.
Correct.
Rather than the formal.
Yes.
Now, I do know you train entrepreneurs, you speak to them, you help build systems, and what can really be done to transition?
I think things are already being done.
Okay.
We're going to see a change in another 5-6 years. At the most 10 years, we're going to see significant change because women are preparing for that shift. They are now building at scale. They are now thinking of scale. And that's why I mentioned the age bracket, right, of the women who are in their 30s. They are more audacious. They are no longer afraid as my generation was or the generation before me was. And so that shift, I think, is coming. I think it's also coming because there's exposure to knowledge now that we didn't have before. And the more we see that, whatever you see is what you become. Tara is not the only successful female entrepreneur that's visible. They are more, and as the women begin to see more of a type, because you're inspired by your type. The more they see the type, the more confidence they have in the possibilities.
But like in your time though, where did the fear come from? And because I kind of feel like it's limiting beliefs that you fortunately have been able to break out of. So let's first deal with what the fear was, and then we can later talk about how to break that limiting belief.
I think first of all, there's social construct around it.
Okay.
Right. Like I said earlier on, I'm sitting across the bank MD, and he asked me to ask my husband for collateral. These are the ways women are subtly socialized to think that for you to gain access into a door, you have to have a husband, for example, and your husband has to be A or B or C. This is socialization, and these are small ways that women are exposed to on a daily basis that makes them doubt themselves. And so that there is that social construct, but there's also even our own psychology, right, of how we are raised. Oftentimes many girls are raised in a way where there's a sense in which, if you are, if you're a woman, then you should be, more silent. You're a woman, so when you come out so strong, you come across as being less feminine and less appealing. And so there's that sense in which we're being culturally socialized to think that we can't be big dreamers and we can't be ambitious. And there's a sense in which you feel like you need to, pipe it low as a woman. And these subtle biases are our reality. I watched a video that was done during the International Women's Month in March by a very well-known oil and gas company in Nigeria, one of the leading local companies. And in the interview, the young woman sat with maybe 6-7 male senior executives in the company, and was asking the men questions around how certain things are done to women and asking them if they had those experiences. And you could see day and night. For example, there was one standard question: do you think your looks has ever impacted your ability to get promoted or get a role? And the men looked like, why would that be? But guess what? For women, we know that's a consideration. And so the question is, how does that affect us?
Right.
In how we think and how we see ourselves. Another question there were so many questions that I sat, and as I sat there, you could see the men almost jerk because they couldn't believe that these are the realities. And, if you sat in the room to get with a woman and you're walking on the streets, have there been times where they greeted you and didn't greet the woman beside you? Chances are no. But what happens often is that the men are greeted and the women are not acknowledged. Now, this is our standard exposure. The question is, how does that then affect the way we see ourselves and therefore how we relate to the world?
Yeah. And I think the real question is, how do we break free from that? How do women, the young girl that is listening to you now, how do they break free from that?
I want them to actually know that if you are conscious that these biases exist, then you can address it. But first of all, you have to be conscious. There are those biases, but there's also the internal voice that women have. The voice that tells you you can't, you mustn't. And that voice is the most powerful one. Because you see, sometimes external voices, you can shut them down.
Right.
If you are articulate, if you can respond fast. But there's a voice that's internal, that is your own voice. And sometimes you don't fight yourself. You can fight others, but you don't tend to want to fight yourself. My call to the young women who are listening is to say, there is that internal voice that is your voice. And you also have to speak up against that voice when it speaks to you negatively. So for example, when it says, are you going to be able to finish this book? You need to be able to respond, I will finish, and I am a finisher. So there's an active role that we as women have to play in shutting down voices that are negative, shutting down voices that are saying to us we can't, because it's a reality, it is real. That's one. And then two, there are other things like, for example, I believe in the power of faith, right? And the question for you is also, how does God see you? The person who created you. How does God see you? And if women know how God sees them, as opposed to how the world sees them, then they have more confidence to say, I'm the father of the God, the owner of the whole universe. And therefore, because I am, if I was Putin's daughter, the chances I'll be very confident. The God that created you is bigger than Putin, right? Can you get confidence from that as well? And that will be my charge to young women. How can you use your faith as a way to give yourself confidence as well, but also know that there are voices that are speaking, both negative external, but negative internal.
The thing is, sometimes some of these things, they actually start from home.
Correct.
And if that is not addressed, then they bring it out.
Yes. But even if it's not addressed at home, many times we learn many things when we go out. Sometimes the hygiene that you learned, some of the things, it wasn't what was taught at home. It was when you go into the office that your boss said, you haven't ironed your shirt properly, this is how to iron it, right? So it's okay if you are not taught at home. It's okay if your mom or your dad were negative to you at home. But there is a Yoruba adage around how if they didn't teach you at home, then you come out and you learn it. So,
Right.
so get to the point where, well, I wasn't taught this at home and it's okay. But now I am out in the world. Where do I get the lessons from? Mentorship, right? Associating yourself with people who have these sort of beliefs and can charge you to become more.
Tara, twice you've been mentioned by Forbes. The first, I think, was the 20 powerful women in Africa. You are one of them. And then Africa's 50 most powerful women. You are one of them. Now, you've built House of Tara. I want you to talk me through the journey from the beginning all the way to where we are today. That's going to be a long conversation.
It is going to be a very long conversation. So I started as a bridal makeup artist.
Okay.
I pioneered that industry in Nigeria.
Let me stop you here for a minute. So if it's your first time watching Konnected Minds, or you have been here before but still have not subscribed, do us a favor, because majority of the people that watch our videos have not subscribed. This doesn't help us grow beyond what we expect. So help us by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you. Now let's get back to the conversation.
So I was the first person who basically took a makeup box and had the guts to charge people that I will do your makeup and you'll be able to pay me for it.
So where did you learn makeup from at the time?
I didn't learn it anywhere. I was self-taught. There was no school for it.
At a time when makeup was not cool.
It wasn't even a thing. This is 28 years ago. It didn't exist as a profession. It wasn't a business model. There wasn't a business model around doing makeup. There was hairdressing, yes. There was sewing, but there wasn't you do makeup and then you charge someone for it, because makeup was something you did by yourself. So I started as a bridal makeup artist. So I was doing makeup for people who were getting married. I was fortunate enough to be the makeup artist to one of the largest weddings in Nigeria at the time. It was the daughter of the chief of Naval staff. So Nigeria was under a military government at the time, which meant that the chief of Naval staff was almost second to like a vice president type of structure. So it was a huge wedding and a very well celebrated young woman. But she also had a huge bridal train of maybe about 12 people, which meant that I was now exposed to 12 young women who were soon going to get married. So in a way, that unlocked potential for that business. So I had one big wedding. It wasn't my first, but it was one of the first that launched me out to say this was a possibility. They paid me maybe $2,500 or so naira at the time. My makeup kit cost me 15,000 naira. I often say it was like $100 at the time. It's no longer $100 because of the exchange rate. But at the time, it was 15,000 naira that I bought my makeup box. But I grew from that bridal makeup artist to becoming someone who started to teach, because after many years of doing it, people will reach out to me and say, well, you did my sister's makeup for her wedding. I loved what you did. I would like to be a makeup artist like you. Do you have a school? And I didn't have a school. So I had the apprenticeship model where you came to me, you went with me for my jobs. And when you went with me on my jobs, you watched and you learned.
Right. Hands-on.
Hands-on. But soon enough, there were too many of them. I couldn't take them for every job that I had. So I designed a proper structure around building a school. So I had designed a curriculum.
Where did all this come from? I mean, because the picked up, a makeup box and trying to do some jobs, and all of a sudden people are asking you to educate them on that. Where did the thought come from? How did you formulate all of that?
I think I was responding to needs, to what the needs were. And as the needs came, I started to design based on that. So it was almost like intuitive innovation, where it wasn't something that I knew. I only knew intuitively. It wasn't something I was taught. I went to school, so I knew that curriculums worked. You design a curriculum and then you follow that curriculum. The question was, what will the school look like? I didn't have an idea. But I sat down with someone who was an interior designer, and she said to me, if you have no idea, what you can do is every single day, go and sit in the location that you've rented, and inspiration will come to you. So the more you sit there, and this is why I say sometimes it's in action that clarity comes, when you take action. You are thinking to yourself, oh, I don't know what to do. But if you keep taking steps, clarity will unfold. Now I can say that, but at the time I didn't know. It was the advice of another woman who said, I see you're struggling with trying to design a school, right? How to design the school, because there's nothing like that exists for you to copy. Why don't you go there every day? You've rented a location, sit down there until you get the idea. And the more I took action, the more ideas came. I called artisans, I called workmen. I'd say, do this today, tomorrow I say, do this. Before I knew it, it unfolded. Today, there are makeup schools all over the country. I got a call from the military attaché to the Nigerian embassy in Botswana. And he said, I tried to get your number because I remembered when you started this business many, many years ago. And I just wanted to say, well done, because we get so many applications for visas to come to Nigeria in Botswana. And oftentimes when I ask them what they're coming to Nigeria for, they say they're coming to House of Tara Makeup School.
Wow.
And to him, he was just blown away by that. And that is just the decision of one young woman to say this is possible. And I didn't have the full picture of what it was going to be. But as I went along, it started to unfold. And so I would say to entrepreneurs sometimes who are trying to find their way, is clarity comes in taking action. Take action.
How old were you at that time?
I was 20, maybe 23. 23, yeah.
Yeah.
24.
So there's something I figured out that most accomplished entrepreneurs or on-the-journey entrepreneurs, it is only when they look back on the journey, that's when they find out the frameworks.
Of course.
That worked for them. So sometimes it can be very difficult for the younger ones to really conceptualize what you're saying.
Yes.
Because the reality on the ground is what you are saying, they can't see it. And very similar to what you've just said.
Yeah.
When you were doing it, you just had faith and you just kept going and kept going. But today you can really look back, and that's why you produce this piece.
Correct. That there is a pattern. But I do believe that you can also hear people who have gone before you. For example, I in my case, I've had situations where I've been sat with other entrepreneurs who said, the stage where you are now, I was there and I will be there. I was there, and this is what is going to happen. So learn from it. So I give an example of at a point in time, my business had grown, and one of the largest beauty companies in France wanted to buy a stake in the business. And when they engaged me, I remember another female entrepreneur saying to me that this age that you are is a good time to sell some stake in your business, especially because as you grow older, you get to a point where you'll be looking for more, to do more, something different. And I never thought that day will come, because I was certain that House of Tara was the fulfillment of my life's mission. But no, House of Tara was just a part of my life mission. And just hearing another woman say that, I think when I hear women advice around being a mother or being a wife, some of those advice you can take because you've seen them do it successfully. But sometimes when they advise you from a business standpoint, you kind of resist. And in my case, I resisted the idea, but I look back today and I realized she was correct. That today I've left House of Tara, I founded the company, now handed to a new managing director who's running it on a day-to-day basis. I'm no longer in the operations of that business because a time came where I felt that it was time to transition, to do more. And oftentimes entrepreneurs get there and they don't have the ability to take the step out because they're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of the outside. So going back to this question around building and where I started from training, then after a while, my students wanted makeup brushes. And so that's how I created my very first makeup brushes, set of makeup brushes for them. It was for my students. But on the day of the launch, I invited friends and family to the launch. And they asked me, we thought you were launching powder, lipstick. And I was like, would Nigerians buy a brand that's owned by a local person?
Okay.
I was shocked. But the question was repeated over and over again. And like I said earlier, I was responding to the needs of the customers. And it was clear that a season had come when Nigerian women were ready for local brands. And that's how I created the very first local makeup brand. At the time, it was called Orekelewa. It was powders, foundations, lipsticks. But today we have almost 300 SKUs of products in our line. But it came because there was that question by customers over and over again. And that's how we built the schools, centers across the country, training people to become makeup artists. So, yesterday I got an award yesterday from the Nigerian wedding industry. And it was for that work of building so many makeup artists who are now big players in the industry.
Amazing work. I have interviewed over 200 people in the past few years. And usually the questions I get in the comments, and especially on X, is, that's a great success story, but what's a failure story? And then I'm like, well, how exciting is a failure story? Right. So what is your failure story?
I wouldn't say I have a failure story, but I would say that I've had moments of failings in the course of doing business. I tell a story about, I had a bridal magazine, and it was a bridal directory. It seemed like a beautiful idea, right? And at the time, I invested so much of my time because as a makeup artist, I had access. I had access to the person who was getting married. I had access to knowing who made her dress and how beautiful the dress was. I had access to know who did her hair because I was there present. I had access to know who catered because oftentimes we'll go with the bride. Back in the day, now we don't do that. But you go with the bride for the wedding. I had access to know who decorated the hall. So what that meant was if someone was getting married next and they reached out to me and they asked me questions around who did what and who would do it, I can recommend. So in a sense, I had data. So it was almost like I was an influencer in a sense. But that information, I decided to convert it into a document. And that's how I created the directory. The directory was a flop. It was a flop for different reasons. Number one, it took too much time to gather the data. You remember at this time, there was no social media. So it meant you had to find their offices. You had to follow up with them to give you their artwork. And some of them had artwork. Some of them hadn't built their business in a way that they had any branding. So you had to create the branding for them. It took me almost 2.5 years to be able to bring out one directory. Now, after the directory was out, how are you going to distribute it? There was no infrastructure for the distribution of a physical copy of a directory. In Nigeria at the time, they hawked magazines on the streets, so Ovation and the likes. But Ovation magazine is celebrity news. So people will buy it.
Yes.
But a directory is restricted to a person who's getting married. How many people are getting married? And how often are they going to be in traffic to see that? So it was complicated. Maybe what I should have done was to collaborate with an Ovation, right? Where there was an edition that was for this and that, and so it was part of it. But at the time, I was doing it independently. I had a massive launch. I think it added to the power of my brand, my personal brand, and as a brand, as a business, because it was called Tara Bridals. But it was a flop. Yeah, it didn't work at all. I look at that as one of those stories, but there are many others.
You're building a business in a time when social media was not popular like that.
No,
As a
what
matter of
didn't
fact,
exist.
yeah, because there are a lot of people who don't even know what high five in my space was.
Yes.
Bebo and Tact, because they are Facebook babies and Instagram. So how were you pushing your business at that time?
Well, it was word of mouth. So I was very big on asking people to recommend me, and I know that oftentimes people don't like to ask, especially women don't like to ask. There's a fear of rejection, the fear that if I ask, somebody may say no, and that can happen for sure. But I think that when people say no to you, you can build resilience from it. And it's a strong muscle to have as an entrepreneur. But you can also build emotional strength when you receive no's. But this was the thing that I had, my ability to ask people, to say, I was on campus, I was a university student at the time. I would say to my roommates, my classmates, do you know anyone who's getting married?
Right. Recommend me.
Do you know anyone? Somebody will say, my cousin is actually getting married. Can you recommend me to your cousin? Give me the address and I'll follow up. So it was really about word of mouth. And sometimes it wasn't because they'd seen your work. It was simply because you had the courage to ask.
I also think that word of mouth, in fact, recommendation is the most powerful marketing.
For sure. Without a doubt.
So you built in a great time when this tool was used.
Yes. I mean, social media is still a way of recommendation because when people like and share, what they're basically saying is they're recommending you in a sense. But at the time, all I had to do was to say to someone who is getting married. In other cases, my brides recommended me to other brides.
Okay.
And some cases, the bridal train was already in the bride's house. So you are doing her makeup, and there are 3 of her friends who are on the bridal train. They are getting married in a few months or whatever. They now become your next clients because of how you serve their friend.
And we are going to talk about a lot of things about systems and institutionalizing and all of that. But transitioning from that time to then, visibility on the internet, when did that come in?
So Facebook became a thing. So first of all, the thing I used to do was every month, there was a magazine called City People. And City People was a soft style magazine, very popular in Nigeria. What you would call maybe like Instablog, but in a physical copy, right? And what I was doing every month was I would publish pictures of the brides who I did makeup for in the month of March, for example. So end of March, I will take a slot in City People and put the pictures of every bride who I had done her makeup last year, the year before, in the month of March, and wish them happy anniversary. It was such a hit. Brides loved it because their friends will now remember their wedding and call them to say, I saw you in City People. Tara put out a thing to say. And it was also a way of getting people to say, I want to also be on that list. And so they would engage me. So that was one of the things I did. But soon enough, I moved that to Facebook. When Facebook then opened up, this was my own way of still acknowledging my brides, but then using social media. It was great, but I think that it was also at almost the end of me doing makeup personally, because I had now transitioned from being a makeup artist to being an operator of the business that had makeup artists. So I transitioned, and in that transition, I stepped away from doing makeup for people who were getting married and then built a business that did it. So I moved the focus off my personality to moving the focus now to a company. And so brides were now, and at the time, it was such a specialized service that you were the one who was serving customers. But when I decided to transition, it was hard for my customers to respond to that. And it was at a cost. But I chose that cost because I was thinking scale and I was thinking more long-term.
What was the cost?
The cost was, people who wanted specialized service or personalized service just said, no, I wouldn't use House of Tara because Tara is not going to be the one to do my makeup. And this is the power of vision. When you have a vision, you then determines what your values are. For me, empowering the people who worked with me was my value, right? And it was what I consider to be my own personal values. And I needed to stick with it regardless of what the customers were saying. But in the long term, that became the reality. Today, makeup artists still give personalized service, but they have staff who work with them because they can't be everywhere at the same time. And that was a cost for me to set that as a new way of doing things that now became the reality of today. For sure. And I think in the creative industry, a lot of times, that's what people do. It's, we're self-employed. But I knew that that's not what I wanted. What I wanted an organization. I wanted an institution. And it's because of that same mindset that I was able to step away 2 years ago.
Right. So then how do you transition really from the business being self-employed to an actual business?
I think, first of all, it's understanding that what are the systems that deliver my current success, right? And what are the processes that gets me there? So I know that culturally, and I always ask this question when I go and speak and I'm delivering a keynote, and I often ask, how many people in this room who are Africans can make their mother's stew to taste and smell exactly the same way? And oftentimes people don't put up their hands in the room because they can't. And the reason why, because we don't have a culture of documenting our processes. So your mother will tell you when she's teaching you how to cook to basically play it by the taste, as opposed to giving you measurements of how many tablespoons of X to deliver this outcome consistently. And it's the same way. You are a business owner, you know what you do to deliver the success that you get in terms of the product and the outcome. But it's not documented for anyone to repeat it.
Tara, can you imagine your in-law comes to your house and you are going through a formula? She will be thinking you don't know how to cook.
All right, but that has to change.
Yeah.
Because the reason why Auntie Jemima syrup, pancake syrup, it's an American brand, has been around for more than 100 years. That brand is being sold in Nigeria and across the continent. The reason why is because one woman had that recipe and codified the recipe to the point that it could become a product. When you taste the Auntie Jemima in America and taste it in Nigeria, it's the same thing. And that standardization is what has made it scale to become a product that can be sold around the world. We are not seeing jollof paste doing that, right? Because it was not codified. I mean, that's changing now, but that's the point. So when we as entrepreneurs don't document our processes that leads us to our successful outcomes, that's the reason why we're not having repeatability. And if you want to move from this business is all about me to institutionalization, it has to be about processes and documenting those processes.
I've got a research here. It talks about succession without structure. And it really looked at family businesses across sub-Saharan African. And it realized that a lot of the businesses were failing. In fact, this research was actually done on Nigeria. And in 2025, the study on Nigerian family businesses showed that succession is largely unstructured. Now, I want you to take me deep into how you have really structured your business and how people can learn from that.
So you are referencing family businesses. In my case, I didn't hand over to any of my children because they were not of age at the time when 2 years ago, my children were still in their, in university, right? And I didn't design the company to hand over to my children.
Okay.
I designed the company to hand over to a professional successor. What that meant was anyone who's within the company who I can hand over to, who I can prepare to hand over to, then I will hand over. Mine is not designed as a family business. So I would like to there are two different things.
It is.
Yes.
There's other, business people I've spoken with. They have huge businesses in Ghana. And they've said the same thing, that the reason why most of the businesses will be failing in Africa is because we're always thinking family.
Correct. And there's nothing wrong in thinking family, especially, but if you have, there's a very famous Nigerian company, GIG, for example, that the parents handed over to their son. The father died untimely, mom died untimely. The son has scaled the business, built it into multiple companies today, and it's hugely successful, right? With different companies within that same company. So he took one entity of limited resources and scaled it up. This is the first son that did it. So that is a success story in Nigeria. Dangote has just basically, in a way, transitioned as well because he's handing over to his daughters, right? Now, this success story of this Nigerian company is a family-owned business, okay? In my case, I wasn't prepared. And I think that one of the things I want to say to entrepreneurs is It doesn't have to be your family member. The most important thing is about thinking about structure, systems, and succession. Succession does not have to be tied to your child. If, for example, none of your children is interested, or they don't have the right skill set, or they don't have the passion, why hand over to them? That's why we see some of those failings that take place today. I've seen 2 female entrepreneurs who've handed over to non-family members as successors. There is the Eventful, a company that was founded by the pioneer woman who started event business in Nigeria. She handed over to an employee within the organization. I know another woman, Mrs. Adekpetun, who's in the retail space for uniforms and school kits and things like that, and then manufacturing space. She just handed over to her successor. He's not a member of her family. And the question people ask her often is, why didn't you hand over to any of your sons? And she said, my sons were not interested. They didn't work within the business. They have their own passions and their own interests. Whereas there is somebody within the company who has the interest to take the business to the next level. And he, first of all, worked as the deputy MD. Now today is the MD of the organization. In my case as well, it's not someone that is my family member that I handed over. I handed it to a professional who's now taken over the business and running it after 25 years. So what would my take be for entrepreneurs who want to do the same?
Yeah.
You have to have a plan, for example. There has to be a plan put in place. And the plan to put in place is to say, what is it that the company needs today that only I can give to prepare it for the next level? Do it, whatever that is. And what do I need to do within the company to ensure that my successor can succeed? Lastly, what will I do next? And this is the part that a lot of entrepreneurs fail at. There's a fear of, I don't know what I will do again. I don't know what I can do outside of this, because they've tied their business and their personal success and purpose to this one business. And so there's the fear of, this is all that I know. I don't know anything else. If you want to transition, you have to actually start to explore, to say, what else? What are the skill sets that building this business has given me that I can use in my next half or my next phase? In my case, for example, I ran a very powerful, basically House of Tara was a marketing company because we had to market beauty in the way that I did, right? And there were skills that I learned, not because I went to business, I did go to business school, but there were skills that I learned doing that work. So I'm a powerful storyteller. And the reason why is because House of Tara gave me the opportunity to express myself and then find this gift within it. I'm a powerful public speaker. I speak publicly today. I deliver keynotes across the world. The reason why is because within the business, I had to inspire my people. And every time I created a speech in my head to inspire my people to be committed to the vision that I was building, I was developing a skill. And today, outside of House of Tara, I earn from speaking. Within the business, remember this was a time where we didn't have PR consultants, right, who could work with small businesses. I was my own PR machine. That PR, public relations, ability to be able to be visible, ability to be able to manage visibility, be in the right place at the right time, was a skill that I developed at House of Tara. Today, I'm building Beyond You. And we hosted our very first conference, planned it in 7 weeks. And somebody said to me, my gosh, in 7 weeks, we had 1,300 plus people in attendance. In 7 weeks, how did you do that? Because PR is what I know. And I learned that from running the business. So what are the skills that you have acquired as you are building? Find them, analyze, write them down, and ask yourself, what can I do with it? And lastly, how can I earn? Because the minute you leave your company, you don't earn a monthly salary because now you've handed over to someone who's now going to be earning a monthly salary. Yes, there'll be dividends. Probably if there is dividends every year, that's fine. But if there isn't, what are you going to do to earn? And these are the things that you have to assess, the skills that you have that you can make money from. And I think these are the things that will make people more confident to be able to step away.
You know, there are some last few things you said. There will be dividends you're not going to earn because you've handed over. Ajwa in Ghana says that the business is my business. I am the business. Even if I'm going, it has to pay me. I'm taking money out of that. How? Because a lot of the thinking is very informal.
Yes.
So people don't know how to separate business money from their own money?
If you didn't do that, don't think about succession. No. Just stay there. My business, when I was running it, I earned a salary like everybody else. Every month, I got an alert that says my salary had been paid, like everybody else. I didn't run the company like it was my personal purse. And that's why it was easy for me to also step away, because I didn't buy shoes and wigs from business money. Everything I acquired was because I could afford it from my salary. Okay. Of course, there was also dividends where this is after some years, the business has done X amount of money and I can earn dividends as well, right? There were those things. But if you have not separated yourself from your business, then you cannot even plan for succession that way. It becomes imperative that for that to even happen, one of the first steps to do is to say, this company is an individual and I am also an individual. And what do I do to build this individual, the company? And what do I do to build this individual, me? Which means the company has to have investments. I have to have investments.
Yep.
Right? The company is an entity on its own. It has its children, the staff. They have to be cared for. The same way I have my own life. I'm Fela-Durotoye's wife, but I'm also the mother of Mubolori and Demilade, and there is a life. So I think learning how to separate both, right? And if people don't learn, there are many traders today. We have a huge entrepreneurial, there's some parts of the country that the tribes are very entrepreneurial. And many times those businesses never outlive their founders. And the reason why the businesses don't outlive their founders is because the next generation didn't learn from the other generation to say, what am I going to do differently? Because my father's business didn't last after he passed. What would I do different? And this is what I'm shouting and screaming about when I talk about building beyond you, even in my book, is how do we get this conversation to become a standard conversation? That when entrepreneurs are sitting down and having and talking, they're not just talking about raising capital. They're not just talking about acquiring customers. They're also talking about how do I ensure that I build a legacy business? That if I'm not here today and I drop dead today, that this company will continue to grow.
Is the problem more cultural? The fact that, most of these businesses are not building to hand over?
I'm not sure if it's cultural. I don't know if it's cultural, but I just think that's something that needs to change. And for it to change, we have to, first of all, stop to say, what is it that we're not doing and that needs to be done? Number one is how do we separate ourselves from our businesses and our businesses become less founder dependent? And how do we build systems to say, what are the things that we put in place on a day-to-day basis that delivers the same outcome so that the outcomes are not dependent on me? If I'm not here, nothing happens. Then we move to, there has to be a structure. There has to be a structure, but there also has to be succession. And succession does not only mean handing over the business.
Okay.
Succession could also mean, how do we make sure that in this role that exists in this business, there is somebody who will take over from that role, from whoever it is that is currently there. That now becomes a culture.
I know people who have businesses that are doing about £5 million, $5 million, and they are still actively running the business themselves with a few employees. The question I always ask myself is that, when do you know, for you especially, when did you know that, okay, this is the time for me to step away?
We talk about entrepreneurship, and a lot of times we talk about intuition.
Okay.
We talk about gut feeling. And when you ask an entrepreneur, how did you know to start this business? They'll tell you, I had a gut feeling. In the same vein, there's a gut feeling where you know that the time is up or almost up. The challenge is that there's so much fear about life after now that we don't actually take action when we have that feeling. So there is a place where there is a gut feeling. In other cases, there may be a board where they have agreed that you will run the company. So if there's corporate governance, the board will agree, you and the board will agree about a time where you hand over. Because for everything, there has to be a beginning and there has to be an ending. There's nothing forever, right? And if there's proper corporate governance, that should determine when you step away. But before you can step away, the corporate governance is also part of ensuring that somebody is prepared to take over from you.
Tara, for the purposes of my audience, what does a board mean in a business?
A board is a group of advisors. A board is guardrails.
Yep.
A board is a variety of people who have experiences and can see from the outside and give you counsel that you may not be able to hear, see on your own. And Oftentimes people think that board is for big companies. And I'm like, sometimes we have informal boards. Check it out. Every time somebody in your family, your friend asks you about business, there are people like that who ask all the time. And they give you advice even when you didn't ask them for it. Those are already advisors. If you put them together as a group to identify, there's this person who always asks. And when they ask with intention, they ask with interest. Sometimes when they see your product somewhere, they give you feedback. These are people who are already advisors. Why don't you put them together? Let them sit with you. You can talk to them about the business. They can give you advice. They can see things that you're not seeing because you are in the business. That is a board to me. At a basic level.
Basic level. So, whether it's formal or informal,
yes,
at least identify those people.
Yes.
And take advice.
Take advice, give them an opportunity to even structure the advice in a way that you can apply and then give them feedback.
I figured out that after I left the UK and I left our business for Eddie to run, who's my business partner, the business has grown faster than when I was there. Because I think there's something with bird's eye view that when you look at it from far, you can see all the mistakes.
Yes.
You can see where growth is needed, the direction.
And so you can advise from outside.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And that's the reason why a board is, necessary for your business.
Critical actually. I remember there was a time I wanted to get a loan of the bank, and I recall they were asking me to take a dollar-denominated loan. And a board member who's in the financial services space told me not to take that loan because in a year or two, the Naira was going to be devalued. And if I took a dollar-denominated loan, I will suffer in my ability to repay. I took the advice and I didn't take that loan. And God knows that if I had, my business would have been in problems. This is the power of counsel.
Wow.
And there's a very famous quote that says, in the multitude of counsel, there is safety. In the multitude of counsel, there is safety. And that multitude of counsel can be a set of 7 people, a set of 5 people who give you advice, and then you can find safety in that.
In the beginning, did you have a board?
No.
In the beginning?
No.
Because there's something about control.
Yes.
A lot of us Africans feeling like, this is my thing. Ownership.
Yes.
And, why are you giving me advice? Like, this is my business kind of vibe.
Pride comes before a fall. Pride comes before a fall. See this example I just gave you now. Sometimes also when you start recruiting a type of talent to work with you, especially when you started as a small business. And for me, I was scaling. One of the reasons why those top talents are attracted to your business is because they know that you are accountable to a board. The business becomes more attractive to talents who see this as a way of deciding whether to come and work for you or not. So when we start building our businesses, we start small and then we become medium-scale businesses. And after a while, we require top-tier talents to come and work within our organizations. They don't like to work for one-man businesses because one-man business means that you call the shots. You can wake up today and fire them. There are no systems in the business. There is no structure. There's no accountability. But when you shift to now institutionalizing the business and you set up a board, the board now stands to represent accountability for you, which means that if I am a professional C-suite person who works in a multinational, when I want to come and work with you, I often will be attracted to the fact that you have accountability. And that's represented by the board that you have.
And I think sometimes too, some of them, they feel like there's no longevity in the business they are coming to work for.
So why should they waste their time?
Yeah.
The reason why I'd rather go and work in a Microsoft than come and work for the same kind of company that is local is simply because Microsoft says predictability. There is a way things are done at Microsoft, whereas in the equivalent of the indigenous local, there isn't that. And that becomes a challenge for people to be attracted to.
Yeah. Tara, in Africa, there's always a pressure of, women getting married and focusing on homes and do, all the stuff. Now, at the peak of running your business and still being a mom, how did you juggle all of that?
It was tough to juggle, but I think significantly, number one, I'm married to someone who is used to, he was raised by a very successful mom who was a professor. She was a public speaker. She traveled around the world. She was a geologist, and comes from a long line of women, successful women. So I think that was a factor. What that meant was that my husband saw me as someone who had a lot of potential and wanted to be part of that story. So he supported as much as he could. I think as women, we generally self-regulate. We want to stay back to take care of our children. That's like a default for most women. It's like standard, because the way even our bodies are designed to yearn to nurture, right? We have a womb, and the reason why we have a womb is so that we can carry something. So we are walking around the street wanting to build our careers, but also our body is saying, nurse something, nurture something, carry someone. And we struggle with that. But if you can get support externally, either from your spouse or from your extended family, it makes it easier. I was very lucky. I also had my mom around. I had my sisters as well, who were part of helping me with the business as well. So that helped with it was a struggle, because there are times where I see pictures of myself during that period and I'm like, oh my God, I looked so skinny. But the reason why was because I was so driven to build my business, but at the same time, I was so driven to be a great mom and be present for my children as well. So it was a struggle, but there was also support systems outside of my family. I had domestic staff. I could afford it, and I looked for it, and I worked in maintaining those relationships. I had one nanny for about 16 years, for example, which I believe significantly helped, 16 years, which significantly helped me to be able to, at the time, grow my business, because just knowing that you had someone that you could trust at home made a world of difference.
Let me stop you here for a minute. So if it's your first time watching Konnected Minds, or you have been here before but still have not subscribed, do us a favor, because majority of the people that watch our videos have not subscribed. This doesn't help us grow beyond what we expect. So help us by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you. Now let's get back to the conversation. You know, I've heard some women speak, and they've said that they don't want to do it because it slows them down. The topic of having children when they are busy running a business or chasing a career, it slows them down, so they don't want to do it.
So I've heard that, and somebody asked me, did it slow me down? I don't think it slowed me down. And the reason why is because I continued to push the frontiers of what I wanted to do. When I was running, my children were in university, in just two of them were about to graduate, right? When I was transitioning, I carried them along in the process. They knew how I felt. They knew the struggles I was experiencing because they were carried along. When they were still in primary school, they came to my office to do homework. I picked them up from school. I integrated them into the life. So my children don't know a life outside of their mom. They don't know another life other than their mom works. This is their orientation. So there's no way in the world where my being not doing anything will not be unusual to them. And this is because they were integrated. I took them to school. I dropped them off at school. I went to my store. I picked them up after school, brought them to the store. They were there. They are House of Tara employees who remember them as, 6-year-olds, knew how their characters were forming, because they were part of House of Tara in a sense. And so if there's a woman who's struggling with that, there are people who have done it and they did it well. I look at other women who raised boys, for example, like me at the time, and they built successful businesses, and they were my inspiration. And I think the more you focus on those, the chances are you can see yourself in them. And that was my example. There was Nika Ogunlesi, for example, was a prime example of a woman who I saw was very, Nika Ogunlesi is a founder of Rough and Tumble. She's in her 60s now, I believe. And at the time, she was one of those female entrepreneurs who I spent time talking to. What I saw was a woman who was very passionate about family life, had a wonderful relationship with her husband. I recently met her daughter, who's now an adult. And I remember thinking to myself, I wasn't wrong about this woman. I was clear. There was clarity around her values that I saw, that I was attracted to. And I'm now seeing the result. I'm seeing a very, very confident young woman who has her head straight, married, running her own personal brand company, the product of this woman who I admired in those years. But guess what? She was building as well as she was building. She was building her family life, but also building her business. And today I've seen the result of the building from the family life standpoint, still happily married, and has raised this amazing daughter that I got the chance to meet today. And then built a successful business that still stands still today. So I'm looking at both things and I'm saying, Nika Gulesin did it, and so can I. In the younger days, I spent time with Mrs. Ibukwa Woshika. She had 3 sons. I saw her family life. It was solid. But I saw that she was ambitious. She was building. And she was not building one company. She was building multiple companies. And so I asked myself, do they have 2 heads? If she can build a solid family life, now she's been married for, her business is more than 30 years. Her businesses, right? More than 30 years. She's still very, successful family life from a family life standpoint. Great husband, great adult children, 3 adult children today who are doing well. And when I look at them, they were building on both sides. They were building businesses, but building family life. And today I'm looking back and I'm saying, if they did it, then there's no reason why I can't. And I'm not afraid. So I would say that the same. I'm built on both sides. I've built my business, but I've also built family life. I have 3 adult sons today. 2 of them have graduated. They went to school overseas and they came out with their heads complete.
Love it.
Right? And what I can say is, if I did it, you can. If you choose to.
I like the last. If you choose to.
If you choose to.
You know, you have, I saw you, holding this book, and then I reached out to the team and I said, I really want a copy of this book so that I can also read and, understand some of the things you've written in here. And no doubt this is going to be a powerful book. But my question really is that for the people watching us and for the audience, why should anyone read this book, Tara?
First of all, there are very few female entrepreneurs on the continent who have documented their memoirs. This is a rare opportunity for you to learn if you're female, for example. But if you're male, to see it from a woman's perspective. I think that's very important for balance. There's a way women think, there's a way women operate, and we are living in a world where women are leading now, right? And so if you're a man, male entrepreneur, buy the book and read, okay? But there's also very few entrepreneurs on the continent who document the how. They document their memoirs, their stories of their own story. Mine is beyond the story. It's also a book that teaches frameworks. So like you said earlier, in hindsight, I'm able to now see the patterns. I'm able to now design frameworks. And the design of the framework is really around building structure. So it's a memoir, yes, but that's not all there is. It's more a business MBA, mini MBA around building systems and structure. There's conversations around people and structure. There's conversations around managing finance. We're talking about, separating yourself from your business. There are lessons there. I teach on it. I talk about developing people, but also developing leaders within the business that become passionate. I talk about culture, how to build culture within the business. And I know that oftentimes when you think about culture, you think about big companies, you think about international brands. But I built culture in House of Tara. There's a way that things are done in House of Tara. So one of the things I was trying to do was, you can start a business as a micro business, as 15,000 or whatever, and build it to this. And that is what is documented here. So you see how systems are built. You see how structure is built. You see my succession story. And you see how I broke it down to deliver the outcomes. And then in every chapter, there are practical questions that you need to ask yourself. And then there are notes that you can document what you want to start doing, what you want to stop doing, and what you'll continue to do.
Love it, Tara.
But on top of that, you should see the number of reviews that I've gotten from this book.
Yes, it's actually on page 231.
Yeah, the number of reviewers, but also the caliber of reviewers, people who read the book. Vusi did a powerful afterword after reading the book. He said he read it in one sitting. Vusi Tembakwayo from South Africa. We have Leke Alder, who's done an amazing, he actually described it as if you wanted to go to MBA, do an MBA, but you couldn't afford the MBA, sit down and read this. And guess what? We also don't have enough of African stories. So when I did a video today, and the questions around books, and it was which book do you prefer kind of thing, and they listed all the books, and 95% of the books that were featured were all American.
Oyinbo.
And the reason why is because we just don't have enough. However, if they were going to do something around fashion, there would have been sufficient names from Africa, from Nigeria in particular, for me to analyze, right? Because it was one of those yes or no.
Yeah.
So Atomic Habit or this, Sheryl Sandberg, who is the author of this book. So they listed 10 books. In the 10 books, maybe 3 of them were Nigerian authors, right? So there aren't enough documented stories. This is now a documented story that when you read it, you can relate because it's describing a place that you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's describing a people that you know.
And a culture as
and
well.
a culture that is common to you and becomes easier for you to relate.
If you're still here at this point, you're definitely a champion. Drop a comment below. Tara, is there anything we could have discussed that we haven't?
I think there are 2 things.
Okay.
Number 1 is the reality of marriage and the power of it if you do it right. Many women who are successful can either be successful because they are able to manage and understand the power of a union. I've seen some of the most successful female entrepreneurs today who may not be so visible because of some of the things we already discussed, but are building heavily well. And they can do so because they have a powerful union at home. And so if you are a young entrepreneur who's married, you can succeed with, not necessarily without. Don't think to yourself, for me to be successful, the marriage will break. No. The marriage can actually even do better because. And if we only learn to assess what our partner brings that we don't have, and assess what we bring that our partner doesn't have, rather than that become a way of competition or a way of conflict, it's a way of complementing one another. So I would always describe my husband and I are very different. I'm very fast-paced. I talk fast. I move fast. I think fast. I do everything fast. My husband takes his time. He analyzes and analyzes and analyzes. The difference between the person who analyzes is that they see all the parts and they're able to predict what the outcomes could be. The people who move very fast can often make mistakes because of their speed. They can move fast because they can gain ground quickly. How about looking at it this way? I move fast. I'm an executor. My husband thinks and watches to make sure I don't make mistakes, as opposed to he's slow, or as opposed to she's reckless. It's looking at the glass half full or half empty. That's up to you.
And the other thing you were speaking about?
The last one is, as women, as we become more and more powerful, I think that the world needs meekness, no longer as a virtue, but even as a skill.
Okay.
And the reason why I said so is because we've seen the world being managed and controlled by powerful men. What is going to make a difference when there's a shift? Are we still going to have the same challenges that we have today as when men lead, where we see the inequality in the world, where we see the world the way it is, it's more and more hostile as men lead? When women lead, what's going to be different? And so my charge to women, as we become more powerful, can we convert some of the virtues that are important into skill sets? Empathy into a skill set. Meekness into a skill set. To say we want to rule the world, but we want to rule the world differently in a way that there is more equity and the world is a better place for our children.
Is the desire to have equality or equity among men and women?
What I see today is both. There's a desire for equality, there's a desire for equity. But I think that it should be more equity.
Right.
because we're not the same. We're different. We're designed differently. The way we see the world is different. But I think it's that variety that should make the world a better place. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean that's why I asked, because there's a whole thing about equality, but the truth is we are different.
We're different. We're different. Yes, but there should be equity, and we should be treated. We should be treated as well.
Definitely,
and that's what's important.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In the pursuit of building a business, developing yourself, which of these is more important, motivation or discipline?
Discipline. Discipline. It's so powerful. I was talking about how difficult it was. I've been writing this book for about 7 years. And I talked about how there were many times I wasn't motivated. What kept me going was discipline. And discipline around asking myself, this is an important goal that I have set. I must finish, but I don't feel inspired. Discipline is, I don't feel inspired, but I must write a chapter today.
Mm-hmm.
Discipline is, who is it that will force me to be accountable to my goals around this book and submitting myself to those people? Discipline is showing up at a writing retreat, even though I don't feel like. And then going to the writing retreat with people who I know that if I see them, I'll be inspired to write. That's discipline. Discipline is saying, who can I write with? Who's going to ensure that I stay in the straight and narrow in a way that I deliver on this outcome? And that's what happens when you take that path of discipline. You deliver this sort of outcome. And that's what I delivered because of discipline, not because of motivation. Because you will not always be motivated.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And there's so much you've shared that I've learned a lot. My ears are like this right now. So to my viewers and to my listeners, if you made it to the end, I would love to know in the comments, and hype this conversation on YouTube. If you're listening in Lagos, Nairobi, or Accra, on Spotify or Apple, make a comment and let me know who you are. Thank you so much. My name is Derek Abaite, and I'm out.